The cage rattled in the wind like a coffin made of bones. Rusted iron bars groaned against the desert gusts, and every eye on Main Street kept stealing glances at the figure crouched inside. She sat with her head low, veil torn, shoulders so broad the cage seemed too small to hold her. A boy dared a step closer. His mother yanked him back. "Don't you look, child," she hissed, clutching his collar. "That's no woman in there. That's a curse." Boots scuffed on the boardwalk as men lined up to gawk. They didn't speak above a whisper, but their fear was louder than thunder. One said she'd crush a man's skull with her bare hands. Another swore she'd torn the barrel off a shotgun when they tried to take her in chains. The sheriff leaned on his post, spitting into the dust. "She'll fetch something," he muttered, though no one in town seemed ready to buy what he was selling. The giant widow raised her head. Her eyes caught the sun, two burning coals beneath the shade of her tangled hair. A hush rippled through the crowd. She didn't speak, but the weight of her silence pressed against their chests. "Best keep back," a ranch hand whispered. "She's waiting to tear out the first throat that comes near." The cage door creaked, the padlock dangling loose. The sheriff rapped it with his boot heel. "Strong as she ain't going nowhere without coin. Price is set. Work or wife, don't matter none to me. Someone's talking her off my hands." No one stepped forward. Men shifted their hats, spat in the dirt, coughed excuses. The widow sat like stone, the desert wind snapping at her black shawl. Then a shadow moved at the edge of the crowd. A cowboy, dust caked from the trail, limped toward the cage. His hat brim hid his eyes, but every step carried the weight of someone who'd seen too much and lived through it. The crowd parted, muttering. The sheriff sneered. "Don't tell me you're fool enough to." The cowboy tossed a coin pouch. It hit the sheriff's palm heavy. The clink of silver cut the silence. All eyes turned. The sheriff blinked. "You're serious?" The cowboy lifted his head. His voice was low, steady as a drawn gun. "Open it." The cage door shuddered as the lock snapped free. The hinges cried like wounded things. Dust swirled into the empty gap. The widow's gaze locked on the cowboy. For a long moment, she didn't move, and the whole town seemed to hold its breath. Then he spoke the words no one expected, words that cracked the stillness clean in half. "Will you be my wife?" The crowd gasped, a sound sharp as a gunshot. The widow's hands curled around the bars, iron bending just enough to groan. The door hung open. She had only to step through, and not a soul dared breathe. Laughter broke like dry sticks snapping underfoot. Men slapped their knees, spat into the dust, jeered at the fool standing by the open cage. "She'll split you in two, stranger," someone shouted. "Best write your own epitaph," another barked. But the cowboy didn't move, didn't waver. He held her gaze as though the crowd wasn't there at all. The widow's shadow stretched long on the dirt, her frame filling the doorway of the cage like a storm bottled tight. The sheriff scoffed. "Your funeral." Chains clattered to the ground. The widow stepped out, iron groaning beneath her touch. The crowd pulled back as if the earth itself had shifted. Dust rolled through the street, curling around her boots. She followed the cowboy. No words passed between them. By dusk, they were riding out, hooves drumming against the hardpan road. The town shrank behind them, nothing but a smudge of wood and dust against the bleeding horizon. The cowboy's limp showed in the saddle, each step of his horse jarring the old wound. He didn't complain. The widow rode silent beside him, veil fluttering in the evening wind, her silence heavier than any chain. At night, they camped in the lee of a dry arroyo. Coyotes yipped across the flats, and the fire cracked with sparks sharp as bullets. The cowboy stared into the flames. "I reckon folks don't know what to do with strength when they see it in a woman," he said. His voice was low, rough from the trail. The widow lifted her eyes. Firelight caught the wet glint in them, sorrow forged into steel. She said nothing. He shifted, pulled a flask, took one long swallow. "I've been a man with blood on his hands. Too much. Thought I could leave it behind." He paused, the fire hissing. "But when I saw you sitting in that cage, I knew you were fighting the same ghosts." Her voice came at last, deep, steady. "They killed him, shot him in the road like he was less than cattle. My hand found their necks before I could think. I didn't mean to live through it. But I did. The cowboy didn't flinch. Then rage is what carried you. Ain't nothing cursed about that. The wind picked up, scattering embers into the night. Her jaw tightened, her hands curled into fists against her knees. From the distance came the echo of hooves. Faint but certain. The widow turned her head, listening. Her eyes narrowed into the dark. The cowboy slid his hand across the dirt to his saddlebag. Fingers closed around cold iron, a six-shooter scarred from years of use. He sat with it in his lap, thumb resting on the worn hammer. The sound grew, hoofbeats rolling across the night like thunder creeping closer. The widow spoke, her voice no louder than the wind. They're coming. The cowboy nodded once. Then we'll be ready. The fire snapped, shadows twisting against the canyon wall. Neither moved. Gunfire split the morning calm. A dog yelped and fled as riders stormed through the town, dust boiling up under iron hooves. Black hats, scarred faces, rifles swinging from saddles. The Blackthorn gang filled Main Street like a flood no levee could hold back. The sheriff stumbled out, hat in hand, voice trembling. Easy now, boys. Ain't no need for trouble. The lead rider, a giant with a scar splitting his cheek, leaned low in the saddle. His grin was all rot. We come for the widow. Windows slammed shut. Doors bolted. A woman pulled her children from the street. Not a soul dared lift a rifle. The sheriff's voice cracked. She ain't mine to give no more. Man bought her out yesterday. A hiss ran through the gang. One spat tobacco, another laughed cruel. Bought her, the scarred man sneered. Ain't no man owns her but us. She killed my kin. Debt ain't paid. Behind him, riders hooted, rifles lifted skyward, firing shots that rattled the saloon glass. The sheriff swallowed, gaze darting to the road out of town. You'd best not test her strength, nor the man she rides with. He ain't. The scarred man's pistol snapped up, cracking a shot an inch from the sheriff's boot. The sheriff froze, face pale. Tomorrow at dawn, the outlaw said, teeth glinting. We'll take her. You hand her over, town stays breathing. You fight. He let the silence hang before spitting in the dust. Then you bury your dead. The riders wheeled, hooves drumming, dust swallowing them as they thundered back toward the canyon. At the ranch, the widow sat sharpening an axe, the edge hissing against the whetstone. The cowboy watched from the doorway, his six-shooter spread in pieces across the table, each part cleaned and oiled with care. They'll come, he said. The widow didn't raise her eyes. They already have. She tested the blade, drawing a thin line of blood across her thumb. Her face didn't flinch. The cowboy reassembled the revolver, the click of metal parts ringing sharp in the silence. Town will fold. Sheriff's got no spine. They'll hand you over to save their own. The widow's gaze flicked up, fire burning beneath the grief. Then we meet them ourselves. He studied her, the way the firelight carved her face into stone. His limp seemed forgotten as he strapped on his holster. They kill my husband, she said, voice low. I'll not let them walk this earth any longer. The cowboy nodded. And they ended my peace long before today. Guess I was only fooling myself. Outside, the wind rattled the dry grass, carrying the faint echo of laughter from the canyon. Dawn would bring blood. In town, shutters creaked as folk whispered in fear. Some swore they saw her shadow across the desert, taller than any man, axe gleaming like thunder in her hands. Others muttered the cowboy's name, piecing together the legend he thought buried. The storyteller's voice curled low. The Blackthorn gang thought they were riding for vengeance. But what they were riding toward was judgment. The street was empty but for the dust. Dawn light cut sharp across the storefronts, long shadows crawling over cracked boards. A church bell tolled once, hollow as a grave. Hooves thundered. The Blackthorn gang poured into town, rifles raised, horses snorting foam. Their laughter carried, mean and hungry. At the far end of the street, the cowboy stepped from the shadows, hat brim low, six-shooter hanging loose at his side. Beside him, the widow walked barefoot on the dirt, axe glinting in her hand, her black veil torn loose, hair wild in the rising sun. The townsfolk peered from windows, breath held. Hand her over. Blackthorn roared from horseback, scarred face twisted with rage. "Or we burn this town to cinders." The cowboy's voice cut through the dust. "You'll burn, Blackthorn, not them." The gang roared laughter, rifles cocking. The widow gripped her axe and stepped forward. The ground seemed to shake beneath her weight. Her voice, low and steady, carried clear, "This ends where my husband fell." A shot cracked, which splintered by her feet. Then the street exploded. The cowboy moved first. His revolver spat fire, echoing down the street. One rider toppled backward, boots hooked in the stirrup. Another dropped screaming, blood misting in the light. The widow hit the charge like a storm. She ripped a rifle from one man's hands, snapped it in two, and flung him into the dust. An axe swing cleaved the wagon pole in half, horses screaming as the wreck tumbled. Smoke and dust boiled, the street a blur of gunfire and grit. The cowboy's limp vanished, stride sure and deadly, each shot finding its mark. He moved faster than memory, faster than any tale dared claim. The widow was thunder itself, her blows breaking bone, her arms hurling men aside as though they were straw dummies. Blood streaked her face, but her eyes blazed bright, unbroken. Blackthorn dismounted, snarling, iron in both hands. He stalked toward her, boots sinking in dust. "You took my blood. Now I take yours." The widow met him head-on, axe against pistol, sparks flashing. He fired wild, bullets ripping past her shoulder. She swung, blade singing through the air. The cowboy's revolver barked. Blackthorn staggered, a hole in his thigh. Still he rose, screaming, firing blind. The widow's final swing split the silence. The axe buried deep. Blackthorn fell, choking dust, the street stilling around him. Smoke drifted. Horses scattered. The last of the gang crawled away, beaten, broken. The cowboy lowered his gun. The widow stood, chest heaving, bloodied hands wrapped tight on the axe. The town emerged slow, hushed, eyes wide with awe. No one spoke of curses now. The storyteller's voice lingers, gravel and wind. And so it was children that the giant widow and the broken gunfighter stood against darkness. Folks feared her once, but after that day, they feared her no longer. They remembered, they honored, and some say, when the desert wind moans at dusk, it ain't the wind at all, but the widow's chains breaking forever.